Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle Desrochers and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday night segment of The Outer Realm. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from New Orleans, and brand new for us, Roku. We are broadcasting live for all you amazing folks over on Roku. So make sure you check us out. Anyway, we are fully sponsored by the amazing folks over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of our journey since the very beginning. Thank you, Folgers. We appreciate you so very much. You have no idea. Also, big thank you to Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, a.k.a. Justin Snicker, for his contribution of his time, his music, and his voice. He is the man behind our intro and our outro. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found anywhere that good music can be found. Artwork is Mr. Steve McGinnis, who does a lot of horror-themed stuff, just amazing stuff. So check him out on Instagram, check him out on Facebook, check out his custom work. He can do just about anything you want, and he's got a great lineup of stuff ready to go. Anyway, tonight we welcome for the very first time Bill and Jaci Kousoulas, and they're going to be discussing their new book, Bridging the Tragedy, Mothman, things like that. So this is going to be kind of exciting. I've actually really been looking forward to this. This was a recommendation, and boy, when I started reading into it, I thought, holy cow, I wanted to do something based on Mothman. And this touches on the Mothman legacy. It focuses on various types of trauma from people of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, who experienced everything that went on with the Silver Bridge collapse. And this is sort of the aftermath and the trauma that people went through. It's just amazing. So I can't wait until we hear what they have to say. So I have essentially sent them their link, and now we're going to wait. So, hey, Brian, oh boy, everybody's chiming in. Tamara, hello. Hello, William. Sure hope there's some good news tonight. Into the war would be a nice switch of the situation. Sure would. Yes, Folgers, Tamara. Folgers. And glad you enjoyed, Ray. Glad you enjoyed the show. Hey, Brian, hello. Nice to see you, my friend. And hello, Kenny. Everybody's just chiming in. So who doesn't like Mothman? That's what I've got to say. I mean, I've enjoyed the movie when it came out and thought it was, let's just say it left me asking a lot of questions because I started, I research a lot and I started finding that there were similarities. Hold on. Our guests are here. Woo-hoo. Hello.
Hey, Michelle, how are you?
I'm well. Oh, and who's this little cutie pie?
This is my wife, Jaci.
Jaci?
Ellie.
I was kind of talking about the little furry one.
Yeah. Ellie.
Hello. So, guys, welcome to the show. I've really been looking forward to this. I was just saying, how I really enjoyed the Mothman just as a story, and you hear so much about it. I've never done, you guys are completely new because out of all the shows, this is the first time I've addressed anything that has to do with it in any way, shape, or form.
Oh boy!
Oh, wow.
Well,
I know, yeah. And Amelia, Amelia does a show with me. She's been under the weather and been going through some family stuff. Everybody's under the weather, so she apologizes that she can't be here because Mothman is one of her favorite topics. So when I told her this had a lot to do with the aftermath of the tragedy and everything surrounding it, she's like, "Come on!" So, that's what happens when you basically pick a bad time to be sick. So, anyhow. Where do you guys want to start? I mean, I don't even know where to start with something like this.
We can start with whatever you'd like to. Honestly, Jackie and I are really both very well versed in the whole Mothman story. We could start
Fantastic.
from the very beginning if you want to. We could talk
Yeah.
about the Mothman Prophecies movie, the book that we've written. You name it. You just go wherever you want. We're not going to miss a beat.
Well, I want to definitely talk about your book. And as you can see, I'm just sitting here and got it scrolling across. So, but where I'd like to start, I guess, is what leads up to that. So, how about we start with the whole, the whole story, wherever you want to touch on, and why and what prompted you to write the book at that point?
Absolutely.
All right. Take her away. You'll find this is round table like. You can say whatever you like. The stage is yours. We want to make the most out of our millions of listeners. So whatever
All
you want
righty.
to do.
Well, hey, again, Michelle, thanks for having us. We're honored
Pleasure.
to be on the program. We do have a panel here, unfortunately, that we didn't intend to assimilate for you, but with Jackie and me, you saw our little friend Ellie. She's our 7-month-old lab puppy.
Aw.
She has a twin sister named Maggie, who's a
Aw.
black lab. She's at my feet right now. And they have a contest where they like to chase our 3.5-pound cat around
Nice.
the house. So, we're hopeful that that's not going to cause a big ruckus. I just wanted to give you a heads up. They might chime
It's
in.
okay. We have people who bring their pets on all the time. We're pet lovers and rescue lovers, and if whatever may be, we all love it, and it'll be an adventure, I'm sure. No problem. So let's start with Mothman. I mean, I guess the whole folklore, or who is he?
Sure.
What is he?
Well, and just for a quick, brief snippet, background, I've been paranormal interested and an enthusiast since the 1970s. Jackie, probably as long as that. She's actually an experiencer. So she has had a number of paranormal experiences. So we kind of
Nice.
balance each other out. I'm not skeptical. That's not where I'm coming from. But I am more investigative and fascinated. And she's a
Same.
first-hand experiencer. So
Yeah.
she's had some things going on that way. So the two of us met in 2004, about a year after I had watched the Mothman Prophecies movie.
Right.
Are you familiar with the movie?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there are too many people who aren't really. I mean, it was such a sensation.
Yeah.
And
really
it really caught my attention. At that point in my life, I was a little removed from super active studying, researching, reading. I was working, the day job and doing the life thing. But I found this movie, and as I watched it, I found it interesting. I didn't think it was a fantastic movie, honestly. It was interesting, though. What caught me was all the various things that went on during the movie. And for those who aren't familiar with the Mothman Prophecies movie, it's based upon the events that took place in 1966 and 1967 in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Sightings of a creature, a black winged creature who was described a few different ways, manifested for about 13 months in that little community, Point Pleasant, and on the opposite side of the Ohio River, in Gallipolis, Ohio. There are a couple of sister cities, and them together, maybe 12,000 people. You hear my little puppy.
I do, yeah.
Harassing the cat. Yeah, there we go. Ellie.
That's okay. That's okay. No worries.
So, yeah, long story short, Michelle, I mean, really, if people are not as familiar with the phenomenon of Mothman, the way that I like to describe it to people who are more contemporary is that what happened in Point Pleasant, West Virginia was very similar to what's been reported the last several years with respect to Skinwalker Ranch. There were so many different things that happened. It wasn't just a black winged creature with red eyes that scared people. There were also UFO sightings. The UFO sightings outnumbered the Mothman sightings.
And that's funny because they don't really talk about that at all, do they?
They don't. In today's popular Mothman culture, that's not really spoken to much. But there was cattle mutilations also. There were all types of poltergeist activity, disembodied voices, you name it. So there was all kinds of craziness going on for 13 months. And at the end of the 13 months, the Silver Bridge disaster occurred. And this is when the bridge that connected basically West Virginia and Ohio went down on December the 15th. And unfortunately, 46 people lost their lives, and it just devastated the community.
Right. Right. Um, you'll just see I'll put comments up every now and then. I'll read them off because we have a huge audio listeners. We're also like FM. Oh,
Yeah.
and we're on Roku live, by the way. So you can watch yourself on the big screen. Anyway, Tamara says there's been new reports of Mothman in New York. And it's funny, and let me know if you guys have heard about this. I know that throughout different parts of the world, when Japan had the nuclear reactor go, allegedly there were reports of a similar type being, almost identical in the skies over that disaster area. So I guess my question is he a harbinger of doom, or is he an omen where he's just trying to warn people?
I think he's there to warn people of
Okay.
impending doom.
Okay.
We had discussions with people that we interviewed about that, and I had agreed with Susan Sayer, who's in the book. She was one of the persons that we interviewed, and we kind of came up with the idea that maybe Mothman was present back in 66, 67 on Point Pleasant, not to warn people so much that the bridge was going to go down, but more to speak to the fact that Mothman literally saved Point Pleasant. Because when the bridge did go down, they rerouted the traffic, and the bridge no longer went down through Point Pleasant downtown area. It goes around Point Pleasant now. The traffic all flows around it. So they lost their commerce, and businesses started closing slowly one by one by one. And the town was dying. And because of Jeff Wamsley, the owner operator of the Mothman Museum,
Right.
Mothman has brought Point Pleasant back up and running again.
Wow, very nice. The
Yeah.
tourist attraction. So,
Yeah.
now, have there been sightings of him since this tragedy?
I think I would say that there are definitely reports of winged creatures that resemble what we've come to know as Mothman. There's, out there these days, there are all kinds of reports. There are various websites that a lot of reports go to where people are disclosing that they'd witnessed a Mothman type thing or something that is close enough in description to what the general consensus of the Mothman community would accept as being a Mothman sighting. There are reports. I mean, there's an awful lot of activity that states that people are seeing things, and they aren't just in Point Pleasant anymore. Those reports do come from all over the place.
Right. What do we think he is?
Oh boy, yeah.
That's a good one.
What do we think he is? I think it's an interdimensional being. I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we were told by Denny Bellamy, he was another person we interviewed, and he is the director of the tourism there in Point Pleasant for the whole county, for Mason County. And he said that on the first day of opening hunting season in Point Pleasant or that county, 250,000 people, men, women, and children, hit the woods to hunt. And he said, you better believe me, if there was something out there, because everybody was out looking for Mothman, if there was something out there, it would have been found and it would have been shot. And he said they had two questions. What was his questions? What do we do when we find it? Or can we shoot it when we find it? And if there's more than one, can we shoot two?
Of course. Oh my God. Yeah, that's a tough call. I mean, your first instinct, it's that fight or flight or just shoot it. I know. But
yeah,
that's I don't know, it's fascinating, but I guess it sort of falls into the whole cryptid thing like Bigfoot, when you see, I mean, Mothman can fly, Bigfoot not so much, but the footsteps have just been known to stop and then that's it. You look at Loch Ness Monster, they never find anything. The loch cannot sustain anything this big, but yet there are sightings. So is it exactly that? An interdimensional thing, portals, things of that nature? It would make sense. I mean, they're all over the world, power spots, things like that. It doesn't take much. Tamara, I wonder if the Owl Man of England is a Mothman.
Who knows? I mean, that's
They're
entirely
close.
possible. I'm not as familiar with, the Owl Man of England. I would like to kind of piggyback a little bit, if I could, Michelle, on
Of
what
course.
Jackie was talking about with respect to,
Yeah, of course.
what do we think Mothman is? Because I think that it's such a fascinating phenomenon. It's really pretty unique when it comes to the paranormal community. There's nothing really that's anywhere close to it. I mean, there are a couple things here, a couple things there that are kind of close to it, but I really, I've spent a lot of time the last 15 years or so studying the works of John Keel.
Oh, I love John Keel. Yeah.
John Keel being the author, obviously, of Mothman Prophecies,
Mhm.
The Eighth Tower,
Multiverse. Yeah.
Operation Trojan Horse. He was just such a forerunner and such an outside the box thinker when it came to anything paranormal. I mean, really cut his teeth in the industry, basically chasing Indian lore and Chinese lore and going over out east. In his first book,
Oh, he's brilliant.
he was fantastic. But what I really, in studying his stuff that has made an awful lot of sense to me is that he speaks to Mothman as being a transmogrification of energy. Mothman to him is a being that manifests itself in various ways to each individual who perceives it. And I like his book that was really half of Mothman Prophecies edited out, which followed up the Mothman Prophecies, called The Eighth Tower. Because in The Eighth Tower, Keel really goes into the concept of what he calls the super spectrum, basically talking about different levels of reality, different, for people familiar with H.P. Lovecraft, which I'm sure a lot of the audience.
Of course. I had,
The old ones are floating around us right now as we speak. We can't perceive them. They might see us, but we're kind of occupying the same space interdimensionally. And Keel talked about that. And it resonates with me. It makes sense that we have different frequencies, and perhaps Mothman kind of pokes through in different, window type areas like Point Pleasant from time to time, manifests, shows up. And I just love that idea that Jackie and Susan Sayer came up with, that, maybe Mothman really came to Point Pleasant because she was able to perceive that tragedy was going to happen and wanted to be there to be able to help that community resuscitate itself. It took a long time, but the community's thriving now. It's doing great. So I just love that explanation of Mothman.
I love it as well. I think we're always so quick to jump to, things of this magnitude. It's so unusual, and because of how things look, you should just automatically fear them. Unfortunately, there's a lot of that, and I am a big believer in mindset. And I believe that it can go either way. If you take that perception, to me, it makes a lot of sense. Why do we automatically assume that, everything that we don't understand is here to cause harm?
Well, and the human mind does not like an incomplete picture. Our psyches, our psychology, when we see something and we're not sure what it is, we have a need to automatically categorize that into something that we're familiar with. And we're genetically programmed that if it's outside the box of what our perception is, that we better have our guard up. So that fight or flight kicks in. And when that fight or flight kicks in, we lose rationale. And we can't necessarily sit there and reason if we see something immediately that's outside of our experience, especially if it's at night. And especially if it's got red glowing eyes, or that's how it's appearing.
Sure. Let's face it, it's a little unnerving. Alone on the streets by yourself.
Let's hang out, and have a cocktail. The first idea is we really need to part company quick.
Well, and it's flying as fast up to 100 miles per hour behind you when you're driving a car.
Bit unnerving, right?
Yes.
It's a bit unnerving.
Yeah.
Now, you had a lot of people in that area who were getting, like you say, like you had mentioned, Bill, disembodied sounds, picking up the telephone, hearing things on the telephone, and having things showing up, like you say, on that dark street by yourself, and something's pacing the car beside you, or just showing up on the property. Like, there were a lot of sightings of this. What do you think? Like, why do you think that he was making his presence so known? Because to me, that would cause fear. I mean, you're outside of your comfort zone with things like that. You feel like you're almost being stalked, it's a little bit terrifying.
And why Point Pleasant? Why Point Pleasant, West Virginia?
Right.
Well, it was the entire area up and down the Ohio River, and Charleston as well. One of the sightings, the first sighting that was literally spoke of by John Keel, right, was in Clondenin, which is a suburb just east of Charleston, just a few miles outside of Charleston.
Mhm.
So, why that whole area? Have you ever visited that area?
No.
It's very, very, I want to say haunted. I want to say it's a haunted area.
Right.
We've had more experiences there than anywhere that I can think of. That
We have to think of the history, though.
yes,
Mhm.
and I think that's part of it. Plus the
Right.
mountains, plus the cave systems, plus the rivers that merge together. You know, in both Charleston and Point Pleasant,
Mhm.
and then in Parkersburg again.
Right.
There's bridges and there's water where waters meet, where waters mingle, you know?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I don't know, there's just so much.
The changing of energy. I mean, water amplifies, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And let's talk about the cave systems. I mean, that would be a good place for something to hide.
Mhm.
Like let's
Yeah.
let's face it, interdimensional or not. I mean, anything we haven't. I mean, that's a lot of these are largely unexplored. You know, people go to a certain point and that's it. It's we have them up Canada way. They're just loaded, and they're starting to have more and more sightings of all kinds of cryptids. And it's like, wow, who knew? But when you examine areas that have these deep cave systems, they just also come with a lot of different paranormal activity as well as cryptids, ghost lights and orbs and, UFOs and things of that nature. I mean, we have a lot here. Like we stream out of New Orleans, but I'm actually in Canada. And UFOs are like just pretty much like a part of everyday life in and around here.
Wow.
So
Very wooded, very, very wooded,
Yeah.
secluded, and yeah.
And in Appalachia, really, the mountain range there, and from what I've learned over the years, is that it's one of the oldest, if not the oldest, mountain range, not just in the country, but in the world.
Oh, wow, really?
It's just super, super ancient. And, for those familiar with John Keel and the Mothman prophecies, West Virginia was the one territory in the U.S. that the natives really didn't settle in. They avoided it for whatever reason. They avoided it. Keel talks.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
The Melungeons.
Melungeons, that's what they were. Yeah.
A mixed race of people that were there that I think predated the Native Americans. And he talks about the moon-eyed people.
Wow.
Different haunting type individuals and manifestations. It's just it's a fascinating area.
Moon-eyed people almost sounds a little bit like grays in a way. It's the
Well-
big, because their eyes are very round when they don't have lenses, right?
Right. And they were said to have been an Rh negative species. So blood type, the Rh negative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's interesting.
It is.
Yeah,
It
some
is
of us are.
Rh negative species.
Yeah, I guess I'm an Rh negative species then for sure.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of theories with that for sure. Like,
Yeah.
God,
You
that's
talk to Michelle. I'd like to, if I could, expound a little bit on the history,
please.
because I think the history is a huge part of the whole Mothman legend.
Mhm.
That entire region was, interestingly enough, it was Revolutionary War type territory. And it's interesting in conversations that we've had with various people from that area, we began talking about history. And the first thing that people told us the very first time we went to Point Pleasant several years ago was that the history of West Virginia is not so much Civil War, but it's Revolutionary War. And then you've got to stop and reframe, this goes back further than we were even aware of, because when we think of a major war, we think of the Civil War. But George
First thing that comes to
Washington
mind.
was in charge of surveying that entire land for whoever the folks were. The king, allegedly King George, I guess, was the British official on the throne at that time, had George Washington go out and survey that entire area. And when he came to the confluence of the Kanawha and the Ohio River, he is said to have looked out and observed where the rivers merged and said, "This is a very pleasant point." So Pleasant Point over time turned into Point Pleasant,
Right.
which is the name of the town. So that's one part of it. And the other part is the legend of Chief Cornstalk.
Right.
Legend of Chief Cornstalk. He was a native chieftain who was basically the head of the Shawnee and Mingo tribes, who were doing what they could to prevent more white colonialism from the Virginia side across the river. And so he was on a mission for peace. He was a very rational person, great speaker from what history tells us. He was en route to go to speak to the settlers. Unfortunately, there was another skirmish that broke out, and a couple of the whites were killed in this skirmish. And there was a lot of drinking that was going on. They found out that this had happened when Cornstalk and his small entourage arrived at Camp Randolph. They took him prisoner, and shortly after that, basically executed him point blank. Now, the legend of Mothman, which we've come to learn quite a bit about from both one of his descendants as well as, again, our friend Denny Bellamy, is that the legend itself was that in his dying breath, Cornstalk uttered a curse upon the land and said, "This land will not prosper for the next 200 years."
Wow.
So, do you want to elaborate on what Lynn told us at that point, and how that went? Or you want me to do that?
Go ahead. You're talking.
So, I can just put her on the spot when I'm thinking about stuff, and I know I run my mouth too much.
Yes, he does. But
So I try
he
to.
speaks well, so.
Thank you. Pull her in because she knows as much as I do. I just don't give her the chance. But basically, on our very first trip to Point Pleasant in 2016, we met with a lady by the name of Carolyn Harris, who is the co-founder of the Mothman Festival, along with Jeff Wamsley, who also runs the Mothman Museum. And we met with Mark Griffith, who is a gentleman who is also in the restaurant. He is also in our book. We've been good friends with him since then. But the lady that I'm talking about, her name is Lynn Robinson. And Lynn is actually, she described herself as the seventh fire descendant of Chief Cornstalk, meaning she's the great, 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 great granddaughter of Chief Cornstalk. And I asked her, I said, "Do you think that your great, great, great grandfather, did he curse the land? Does that have something to do with this?"
Oh.
She respectfully looked at me and addressed that question and said, "Absolutely not." She said, "There is not a Native American who would ever curse the land.
No.
They don't own the land. We don't own the land.
That's right.
We take care of the land. We are
That's right.
stewards. We work in harmony with nature." She said, "Absolutely not." So during our interview a couple summers ago with Denny Bellamy, Denny kind of dispelled that myth too. And this part I know you like to talk about.
Okay, so there was an old school that was built in 1908 or sometime around that period. And they were tearing the building down. And when they tore away a wall, they found an old closet. And when they opened the old closet, there were some old supplies and things in there. And they found plays, the school play of the Chief Cornstalk curse. And inside that playbook, it spells out the curse exactly the way if you Google it, you'll find that from the play, from the script. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Here's something else that's interesting. And this doesn't to do with the curse, but when we talked to Lynn, we went out to the TNT area because that's where Mothman was spotted, and that's where everybody goes when you go to Point Pleasant. You got to go to the TNT, you got to go to the igloos, you got to do all this stuff. And when we went there, she had given us tobacco to spread, and she told us how to do it so that way the Native Americans would know that we came in peace and that we weren't there to do any harm. We were
like an offering of sorts.
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason that is because that was their there's burial grounds out there.
Yes.
So they lived on that land. There's a Cornstalk, what is it called? The Cornstalk grounds is what
Cornstalk
it is.
burial grounds.
Yeah.
Chief Cornstalk burial grounds.
So I think that's interesting too, just the fact that that was where the tribes lived for a while as they were passing through. And then also Mothman is sometimes compared to the Thunderbird, which relates back to Native Americans. So
Yes, absolutely. The Thunderbird, that's a whole other like amazing legend. It really is.
Yeah.
I need to just do a show just on all of this stuff because it's fascinating. People love it. Hey, Dolly. Dolly's a good friend of mine. Want to talk like super mega experiencer, like UFOs and everything? That girl. Highly in demand for the show circuit. My mother's family was from there, daughter of the American Revolution. And
Awesome.
here's a part I find interesting. My
Awesome.
mom was obsessed with what she called light demons.
Interesting.
Dolly, can you elaborate on what she thought they were? She will. so, so now, so we're looking at a little bit of this folklore. Do we feel that there's something about this land? I mean, obviously, they were saying like they thought the land was cursed. Is there something with the land itself that maybe could have attracted this being?
I think one of the things that Jackie just hit on, and I'm glad she spoke about this, was the fact that, and we haven't really elaborated a lot on the TNT area.
Yeah.
But the TNT area is where Mothman was very predominantly sighted by the Scarberries and the Millettes, who were the first folks that actually encountered Mothman in Point Pleasant proper or in the area.
Mm-hmm.
There were others who also did too in that region as well.
Right.
But when we talk about, the fact, like she had mentioned, Lynn had asked us and given us tobacco and said, take this out there with you so that the spirits know that you're not there to cause harm. And we did that. The fact that it's a burial ground, the fact that it's really 3 burial grounds, if I remember correctly, and that they're mass burial grounds means that they were not individuals who were treated respectfully at the end of their lives. They weren't given their proper send-off. That there is a likelihood that because of that, that could generate paranormal activity. So we talk about the differences. We talk about the confluences of the river and the energy that's associated with that. We talk about the Native American burial grounds and the desecration. Although I'm sure any of that takes place now, or at least most of it take place now, would be just people who are unconscious of the fact that this is what's gone on. Could very well cause spirits to be very restless, and perhaps maybe they were responsible for manifesting some of this stuff that was going on. And another piece of this too, which is really, I think, super, super interesting, is that the TNT area was called TNT area because it was an area that was designated by the government during the World War II effort to manufacture munitions that were being put together for the war effort. So it was an area where people commuted to somewhat blindly. They worked there, they jumped on buses. The buses were blacked out. They didn't really know where they were going. They kind of knew what they were doing, didn't really know what the end game was. So they were just playing a part and presumably making a pretty good paycheck to be able to build these weapons of mass destruction. So is this going on? Are these things that are happening here? Manufacturing these munitions in combination with confluences of rivers, in combination with these Native American components of desecrations of burial grounds and all this. Is this some type of an archetype? Is Mothman some type of an avenging angel here to basically level the playing field, or at least make some type of an awareness that there are things that are going on here that shouldn't be going on here?
Oh gosh, like, do you think a sort of, I'm just gonna put it out there, like a Native American, like a land guardian, like an elemental of sorts?
Quite possibly. We talked earlier about seeing something outside of our comfort zone will scare us.
Yes.
You can go back to biblical times, and when they described angels made people tremble in fear. And these are supposedly,
the archangels don't look anything like what people think they do either, right? If you look into
I haven't seen one, but I believe you.
Oh boy, yeah. You just Google it, like the real archangels, what they look like, and you'd be just like, I did not see that coming. First time I saw it, I was like, wow. So yeah, I could completely, if that's what they were really seeing as opposed to our perception, that would be really frightening. Just saying. But Dolly elaborated. She says demons that would appear corporal as human with wings and red eyes. These specific ones, they brought disaster. So it wasn't the other way around. So I think you would have to have a sort of balance
Mhm.
in you have good, obviously you're going to have the other, as I say. So that's really fascinating. I like that whole theory that you were just explaining. So do you think when you say that there have been last sightings, do you like, are they still happening in this area, especially this area?
Meaning Point Pleasant itself.
Well, Point Pleasant, yeah, or I'll say like the sacred land, as we say.
I think so. There have
Yeah.
been other reported sightings. One of the things that Jeff Wamsley spoke to when we spoke with him, and we've known him now for several years. He's become a good friend of ours.
Good. Yeah.
But he spoke in terms of the fact that December 15th, 1967 was the day the Silver Bridge collapsed.
Right.
And Denny Bellamy echoed what Jeff said. And using my words to summarize what they said, let's not talk about this nonsense anymore. We're burying friends. We have people who have drowned, family members. If you didn't know somebody in Point Pleasant who died in the bridge disaster, you knew somebody who knew somebody who died in the bridge disaster. So I think the focus went to, the rescue effort immediately to save the people that they could. There weren't many survivors, but that's the first thing they did. And then the second thing was to deal with the devastation that took place, the loss, funerals at Christmas time. I mean, a horrible time. All the focus was off of the paranormal stuff, and the focus was upon how do we move forward as a community with this devastating loss. So there were other reports of things that had taken place in Point Pleasant. Seth Breedlove with Small Town Monsters has a couple different documentaries out. One of them called the Mothman Legacy, in which he basically interviews people who experienced Mothman in the 1970s, the 1980s, in the 1990s, 2000s, and beyond, that had come forth and they'd spoken to their experiences. So they hadn't stopped. They just weren't as prevalent. That microcosm that took place those 13 months was when there was off the charts activity. It did kind of slow down, but a lot of it was focus driven and the rest of it was activity driven, but it is still going on. And I have to ask my wife, what did Maggie have?
A battery.
A battery. She just took a battery out of our black lab mouth.
Oh, nice. Fur babies, like toddlers. They all have to act up when you're on the phone or, having a radio show. So, so, I mean, I completely agree. You have to get out of the supernatural and come into real life, rescue families, mindsets. Do you think things were, because like I said, I'm a believer in mindset. I also believe that when there's grieving, that energy changes and we can, create a lot of energy, psychokinesis, telekinesis, things like that. Do you feel in that process that sometimes will attract certain paranormal activity to you as well? I counsel and deal with a lot of people who are grieving, who just want that sign so desperately that they don't even know what they're actually really communicating with. Do you feel, because this would have been like on a mass level, do you think that combined energy, because let's talk paranormal activity for a minute, that combined energy, aside from a location that has a massive loss of life, has to leave one hell of an energy imprint. But now everybody left behind, and that energy being focused on, like you say, rescue, and then the aftermath of the grieving, and those who are left behind to move on, which I'm guessing comes to your book.
Yeah.
So if I heard you correctly, as you were describing that very eloquently.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Very kind. I have sometimes my head, my mouth gets ahead of my head. So if you can make sense out of it, it's great.
I think I was tracking with you, and forgive me if I wasn't, but perhaps the fact that grieving was so prevalent brought the collective energy level to such a different focus that collectively the grief and the recovery and the community banding together in ways that perhaps stretched them beyond what they thought they were even capable of, generated a different energy to perhaps modify whatever energy was there before and maybe stave off that paranormal activity. Is that what you were asking?
I feel, did it amplify it?
Amplify it. Interesting.
Well, there weren't any actual reports, I don't believe, that were like reported to the newspaper or to the police department after the bridge fell. It was 13 days, or the 13 months prior to the bridge collapse where all of this was happening. Right. So,
so people going through the grieving process never had any.
What I'm thinking is that energy has just been like an overflow into all of the years to come, because that area seems incredibly haunted. We do spirit box sessions out there, and we get more information and messed with more than we ever have anywhere. I mean, just we did one right over the river in Gallup, Ohio, and constant messing with. There was 4 of us in on that, and we were all getting hits on personal information, and it was just like coming at us, like we're like, oh my god, it's like, what is going on here? He heard Indrid over and over, Indrid Cold, who is part of all of the Mothman prophecy stuff. He heard Indrid 3 times, 4 times.
I think it was 4.
He's like, oh my god, it's saying Indrid again, and we're all like.
I was at the point that I thought that I was generating it.
Yeah.
I mean, I really thought, this is stupid. There's no way I'm getting this information, through this ghost box that's telling me Indrid, as it's, scrolling through the radio stations. But it kept popping up. And then one of the ladies that we were with also was getting all kinds of messages about a little boy who had been haunting this particular locale that she was aware of. And so she was getting hits about that as well too. So it was really quite an interesting evening. And that's just one incident. We've had other ones that have just blown our minds. It
was literally telling us that the little boy that went down, one of the little boys that went on, Carolyn Harris, who we spoke of earlier, who she's since passed away. Her son was on the bridge. He was 2 years old. And her husband was on the bridge. He went down. They both passed away. And we literally got dark, cold cage. And we're talking. It's like, do you feel like you're in a cage? It's like asking all these different questions. And when we asked if his name was Timmy, there was a confirmation of that. And the little boy's name was Timmy. I mean, it was unreal.
Well, that kind of energy could definitely make it easy for spirits to communicate. They have a lot to work with,
my millimeter kept getting big hits. I mean, big hits on it. And it was like,
Right. So it's become a hotbed in more ways than one now.
Yeah. Right. So possibly that disaster did percolate, I guess, into
some of the residual effects, some of the different things that are occurring presently. Jackie's right. When she uses the word haunted, and I don't want to interpret what she's saying, is my thought about the whole thing is I have never felt, when I've been in the Ohio River Valley, especially in the Point Pleasant area, felt that there is a negative entity or something that's there haunting to cause harm.
No.
It's a very charming place. I mean, the word that I like to use to describe Point Pleasant is it's idyllic. It's like Mayberry. The people are kind. They're friendly. There's a very welcoming aura there, but there's a magic. There's a magic in there. So when Jackie uses the word haunted, it's more like a magic, and it's not like a black magic. It's a, it's an excitement. It's a kindness.
It's pleasant.
Yeah.
Wonderful. There you go.
I surprise myself every now and then. So I like that, because it's just people automatically, again, we assume when you go to places of disaster that you're going to have this heaviness. You don't feel that heaviness in this location where you think you would when you have such a mass loss of life, because it is a tragedy. I think you guys, titled it right. Bridging the tragedy is definitely a tragedy. And it's hard to recover from that. But yet, this community not only recovered from it, but they made it so this memory lives on.
They are thriving, Michelle. It's been so neat. In 2016, the first time that we went there, and mind you, this is legendary to me. So we show up. Hey, there's our buddy Mark Eddy. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark. Yeah.
There's our buddy, one of our besties. But so excited, so amazed to actually be there. And then to find the level of compassion and humanity and sense of community and welcoming everybody that we met. We just loved it. It was just absolutely amazing to us.
So let's talk about UFO sightings out there a little bit, because that's something, let's face it, it's pretty unique areas that have these multiple sightings. And leading up to this point, there was all of these sightings. Are there still a lot of sightings there?
There are some sightings.
Okay, so even that's toned down, eh?
Yeah.
Wow.
And one of the things, it sounded like you might.
Well, we don't know really how much it's toned down, because it's not like, I don't know how it's reported, but I was doing a video. We were in the TNT, and there were 3 of us, and he got a phone call, and he's talking on the phone, blah, blah, blah. He's going on and on and on. So there's these birds, and they're big birds, and they're flying over. So I'm videoing these birds. And when I would get back to the hotel, whatever video I took for the day, I was downloading and putting in files on my computer. As I'm watching one of these videos of the birds, I see this like white plasma ball in the sky. And I can't remember exactly, because I haven't watched the video for a while, but I think it went down or stayed still or something, but there was like another little white ball, and they joined together somehow, and then boom, they were gone just like that. They didn't just like dissipate. It just was gone. Took off. Yeah. I mean, I didn't see it like flying off or anything. It just disappeared. So they're still oddities, if you want to call it that. I don't know what else to call it. There's things that happen.
High strangeness.
That's exactly. People are seeing shadow people out there. People are still seeing a lot of stuff in the TNT. So we thought we saw John Keel's chapter, Purple Lights and April Foolishness. We were out there, and we saw this really strange formation in the night sky. It was like a reddish almost, wasn't it? And it was like dreamy looking when you were looking at it. And we're like, whoa, and we're taking these pictures, we're trying our best to figure it out. And we had a MUFON investigator with us. And so what we ended up figuring out what it was a strawberry moon. And with the reflection of probably the water and the clouds and all of that, it was just all of the behind stuff, the reflection behind the clouds and all of that was causing all of this. But I mean,
yes,
we really thought we were seeing some type of weird stuff going on in the sky there. So
right. Meanwhile, you have a logical moment. Gotta hate when that happens. It just takes away from the excitement.
You don't want that to be the case, but sometimes you have to chalk it up.
You do. You have to just be level-headed about it, I suppose. So
as we're snapping all the pictures, we're talking through it, and we're like, okay, well, that explains it. But so there are things happening, because we, excuse me, when I looked at that video, I sent it to the lady that was with us, the MUFON investigator, and then she sent it on to other investigators, and nobody could explain that one. So, excuse me.
So absolutely, do you need to take a moment?
Down here,
no, that's okay.
We were talking about UFOs, we were talking about currently versus what it looked like in the past. And in the Mothman prophecies, Jackie mentioned that there's a chapter called Purple Lights and April Foolishness. And in that chapter, Keel really goes into what was happening from the UFO perspective. And he and the local reporter, a lady by the name of Mary Heyer, who worked for the Athens, Ohio Messenger satellite office right there in Point Pleasant, she was already, getting involved with the Mothman sightings and the UFO sightings before Keel even arrived on the case. And so they kind of paired up, and with her credibility within the community, he was able to interview people who had seen Mothman, who had had strange encounters, who had seen UFOs, all these different types of things. They trusted Mary, so they trusted John by proxy. He was right there with her. But they
Right.
went out to the TNT area to a road called Camp Connolly Road.
Mhm.
And in the Mothman prophecies, they talk about how the two of them were out late. It was midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and they were looking up at the skies, and all of a sudden they saw something, and it was strange aerial activity. And so John looked up at it, and he had one of these heavy duty, like industrial style flashlights, and he started flashing Morse code at this light that was up in the sky. Which, as he was doing this, all of a sudden, this light started doing like a falling leaf type sensation, like it was walking down a step of stairs.
Right.
And Mary asked him, "What did you tell that thing with your Morse code thing?" And he said, "I spelled out the word descend." So he basically
Wow.
makes it sound as though he communicated with this entity that then in turn followed his instruction and did what he asked it to do.
Wow. It sounds a little bit like he was doing what we call today a CE5.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, which is interesting, but he did it with Morse code because I mean, so many people now, of course, I guess it's just new upgraded version, but we're able to just be telepathic
Yeah.
with it. You know, I mean, I've tested that theory and have had amazing results just by going out and saying, in my mind, just telepathically saying, okay, I think I'm ready. The next thing you know, you have all these things happen. Like, okay, maybe not. you know, but yeah, John Keel was definitely ahead of the game with things like that. And obviously, this was an area that he was very successful in. And writing about it, I think, was definitely a precursor to warming people up to everything else. And I think, if anything, the Mothman prophecy definitely opened up that door to Point Pleasant, but because it made us feel, we shared that tragedy. We shared in those emotions, and we just, I felt like just being, empathic and mediumship, just thinking, oh my God, like my heart just sank. And it's an image that it just doesn't leave you.
And to speak to that specifically, when we arrived in Point Pleasant on the night that we got there the first time,
Right.
we had driven up from the Serpent Mound. We had decided to visit there first.
Of
We're
course,
Chicagoland
the Serpent
people.
Mound. Yeah.
Yeah, we're Chicagoland people. So
Yeah.
I like to tell people we're really got more cornfields where we live than skyscrapers.
Right.
We're really on the far west suburbs.
Right.
But so we drove down to the Serpent Mound, and we spent the evening. The next day we investigated that, and then we jumped in the car and hightailed it to Point Pleasant. And I was on a high the whole time because I've been so excited to go there since I first learned about the whole Mothman phenomenon. And so when we arrived in town, everything was closed. It's a tiny little town. We got there after 5 o'clock. We went to the Mothman statue, of course. We had to see that. And we looked at the museum, but they'd already closed up shop for the day. And there was a restaurant right across the way that we talked about before. And it was called Harris's Steakhouse,
Mothman Diner.
AKA Mothman Diner. And Jackie, I didn't know what else to do. She's a little more adventurous than me in certain things.
Right.
And she was kind of checking things out right across the street from the post office and looking into this little restaurant. And she sees a little lady in the window. And she says to me, I think she wants us to come in to talk to her. And I wasn't like fully engaged in it, but she insisted, not like in a rude way, but she just quietly said she wants us to come talk to her. So I said, okay. I've come to trust my wife's intuition over the years.
Right.
We walked in. That's when we met Carolyn. And unbeknownst to me at that point in time, that she was the co-founder of the Mothman Festival, and that she had lost her young son, Timmy, in the bridge disaster. Did not know that. But to meet Carolyn was to know Carolyn, and to know Carolyn was to love Carolyn. And we sat with her. We sat with Mark Griffith, who we mentioned before. We just sat, and in Mark's words, we like to chew the fat. We just sat down and visited with them. And I immediately felt like I was back in one of my great aunt's houses. And I wasn't conscious of this. It was a feeling. I felt comfortable. I felt safe. I felt like a little boy again. And and I'm not. But we were sitting at this table visiting with her, and we just fell in love with her. And as she told us more about the story, she told us about the UFOs. She told us about the men in black. She told us about the other men in black. Some of them were government men. Some of them were weird. There was something different about them. She told us about the lights in the sky, the beautiful lights in the sky. And so as we stuck around for the 4 or 5 days we were there, every day we went back to Carolyn's and visited with Carolyn.
She told us about the UFO that landed in her brother's backyard.
Yep.
Yeah. She told us a lot of stuff, but she would not talk about the bridge disaster because of her son and her husband.
She told us, and we didn't press.
No, but it's interesting that you got that spirit box communication with this little tyke, you know. But Men in Black, that fascinating. I could see Men in Black, you know, the weird kind, the ET type, you know, not of this world. But let's talk military Men in Black. Why do you think they would be interested in this area?
Well, the UFOs and the strange activity that was going on with the Mothman and things like that is what I would think. In the words of Denny Bellamy, one of the people we interviewed said, "We grow good pot in West Virginia."
Could be Men in Black type of pot, though. I don't know. that would really have to take you off the planet. But
yeah, there you go.
You know, but I mean, the UFOs I can see, but if it's an area that's constantly having activity, I mean, activity happens like everywhere. I mean, really, you know, here like say, like you go to the Niagara region, there's tons. There's always reports. You go to MUFON, you'll see reports happening all the time. But I've yet to see, and I could be wrong, but I've been doing this for a really long time. I've been in the field myself for, you know, at least a couple of decades. I don't think we've had any real Men in Black experiences. So I could see it, okay, you know, in the skies, and you have a lot of paranormal activity. It's a bit of a hot zone. Mothman, I could see, you know, again, being of interest to somebody like that. But again, you're getting into interdimensional beings, and cryptids sort of show up all over the place. So it just makes you wonder.
Well, a thought that I had when you were asking that, why Men in Black?
Yeah.
Why UFOs, yeah. Why government, guys?
Yeah.
Here we've got this ultra secret kind of operation going on where we're building munitions. We've got stuff that's going on.
Right.
I got to tell you, we're good friends with a gentleman, a co-researcher. When I call him a co-researcher, he's a trailblazer. I mean, dude's been in the field for a long time. Guy by the name of Andrew B. Colvin. And Andy is largely responsible for repopularizing John Keel's lost works. He's the one that came out with the compendiums that you may be familiar with. Flying Saucer to the Center of Your Mind, which one it referred to in the Hellier documentary. That's Andy's work.
Searching for the String.
Searching for the String is another one. Outer Limits of the Twilight Zone. He's got about 15 or more of those. He just popped a message on my phone because we communicate regularly. He called me today and we had a little conversation. He's a good friend of ours. But the reason that I'm talking about Andy is that his thought with respect to why all this was going on is that there was a secret operation that was going on. He thought the government had UFOs back there. He thought that in the TNT area, there was more going on than just manufacturing of munitions for World War II. Yeah. That we had something, if it was a captured alien craft or whether it was something that was one of ours that was being perfected basically for a mission, whatever it was. I mean, that's part of his conjecture in some of his research.
That would explain, you know, military type Men in Black. It goes back to sort of like that Skinwalker Ranch thing, you know, what's underground. There are places.
Everything okay?
That would be my dog, which is about 3 pounds. Anyway, all right. We'll leave that right there. Yeah, I mean, that would explain, you know, why you would have that sort of activity. And wasn't there, because of these munitions, like, wasn't there some kind of, you know, urban legend about Mothman possibly being a product of, you know, bioengineering or something of that nature?
that, or that because it's such a contaminated area that it was, what's the word I'm looking for?
A genetic mutation.
Yeah, a mutation.
Right. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Which
do you think?
it is very contaminated still. I mean, the ponds out there are just covered with a lime green sludge. It's awful. They pull like 3-eyed fish out of there, and they've seen 8-legged deer and all kinds of strange things out in the TNT area. So
Mhm.
I don't buy that though.
No.
I just don't buy that, because how is it that they can't catch it? If that's the case, why can't they catch it? And why was it seen all the way to in Charleston and all the way up in Parkersburg? So if it was a mutation, there had to have been several mutations for it to travel like that, unless it is an intelligent being that can literally fly at high speeds, which it did, and know its way around. It kept coming back to Point Pleasant for whatever
Yes.
reason.
Yes. So that sort of scraps that all together. Again, it kind of makes me wonder, do you have these military men in black? It's like, I don't know. What is it? Does something get out? That's what my first
Mhm.
thoughts. Like, I don't know. They just don't just randomly, show up unless there's something of significant. I agree with you, significant interest or significant, something that they're trying to protect and make sure it does not get out.
Mhm.
I was thinking that when I was like logically trying to process what Mothman could possibly be
Mhm.
back before now, put it that way.
Right.
Wright Patterson Air Force Base is not far from there.
Right.
And I thought, well, maybe it was a man in a flying suit, and it has night vision goggles and it's just flying and scaring people, because it never hurt anybody. If it was a dangerous being
Mhm.
or was a killer being or whatever, alien or whatever it is,
Mhm.
it never hurt anyone.
Right.
So
Did
then
it communicate with people? Like, I mean, obviously, you can only believe a portion of what you see in the film, but there were people who had allegedly come forward to know that they had some kind of a communication, whether it be like through the telephone or, on the property, that there was some kind of an attempt at communication, and for others more so.
So there's another book that was written 5 years before the Mothman Prophecies by an author by the name of Gray Barker.
Yes.
And you're familiar with Gray Barker. I'm sure a lot of the audience is familiar with Gray
Yes.
Barker. He doesn't have the best reputation
Right.
in the research community, just because he and Jim Moseley did a whole lot of hoaxing. So
Right.
they kind of got themselves a little bit of a bad rap. Barker was a phenomenal writer. He was very literary. He did a wonderful job of telling stories. His book that came out in 1970 was called The Silver Bridge. And it's, in Andy's words, it's what you call kind of a docudrama, because it's
Right.
not really a documentary. There's a lot of stuff that he takes poetic license with. In fact, he has a couple chapters that are written from the perspective of Mothman. So he's like putting himself into Mothman's, position, and then, writing that particular chapter to discuss that. But the reason I'm mentioning this is there was a lady in chapter 1 or chapter 2 of The Silver Bridge, and I believe her name was Virginia. I forget what her last name was, but in Barker's language, he described her as having second sight. And by second sight, basically, we mean she had some type of psychic intuition,
Yes.
some type of abilities to interpret things here and there.
Mhm.
And she was one who actually, in the beginning of that book, prayed for Mothman, that he was not if he was some demonic being, that somehow he'd find his way to the light or what have you.
Right.
But she reported some type of messages that she received that she had thought were from Mothman. There were others. One of the witnesses, we talked about early on, Linda Scarberry, who was one of the more predominant witnesses who stuck it out for really her whole life in Point Pleasant.
Mhm.
And felt that she was haunted by Mothman. When she was asked how many times she saw Mothman, she said hundreds, if not thousands. She
Wow.
felt every time she went outside, she would see it. So she really struggled with a lot of issues that happened in her life as a result of her initial encounter, and never really being able to get past it. She was really traumatized by all of that. But One of the things that she stated in one of the documentaries was that she had felt that at one point she saw Mothman on a cold winter's night on a roof, either her roof or a roof across the street. And
Right.
it had its wings around itself and it appeared to be shivering. And she felt pity for it, that it was lost, that somehow it was a creature from a different realm that couldn't find its way home. And
Oh,
she sympathized for it.
wow. Could she communicate telepathically with it, do you think? Maybe there was some kind of a connection for him to keep coming back to her, something about her.
Could be maybe something
Yeah.
latent. I've not heard that she had stated that she had communicated with Mothman.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just interesting because sometimes beings, like even in the spirit world, sometimes there's just something about an individual, and we call them haunted people. And it doesn't matter where they go or what they do in their travels. They just always seem to be that beacon. And it just makes me wonder if she was some sort of a beacon because she had this empathy for this being, and he may have picked up on that and figured, here's somebody I can be around, and because that's a lot of sightings.
It is a lot of sightings. It is. I mean, it's
Mhm.
and what the way Denny described her during his interview was that her life was destroyed, basically. That she was
Right.
one of the ones that was quote unquote crushed by her experience of viewing Mothman. Now, like Jackie mentioned before, Mothman never physically harmed anybody, never came down and slashed somebody or
Right.
stabbed them or bit them. It wasn't that type of a thing. She was one of the ones that just couldn't get past the trauma that it manifested. Now, I can also tell you that
Sure.
the Letts, which is the other couple that were with Roger and Linda Scarberry, that first night will not speak of it at all. They will never bring it up. It's funny, actually. In 18 or 19, she had to work, and I took the annual trip to Point Pleasant with a friend of ours, and we cruised out, and we were with one of his relatives, and he took us right by the Millette's house, and he said, "Let's just stop in there and go talk to him." And I said, "Are you kidding me? These people
What?
I'm not going to go up to their door.
Yeah, right.
They don't want to talk about this. I would love to have a conversation with them, but I don't want to violate anybody's boundaries."
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, it's touchy on a lot of different levels. Like you said at the beginning of the show, you either lost a relative or somebody who lost somebody. It's a domino effect. It affects. This is a community loss. It wasn't just about individual loss. This was a horrific loss to the entire community. So to not want to talk about it, I can understand. You lose somebody, you don't necessarily want to talk about things like that, and especially when there's a stigma attached to it
Yes.
that tends to overshadow.
Yes. What was really fascinating to me, Michelle, is the fact that we go back in time to 1966, 1967, and we think about the political component as to what was going on. The Vietnam War was happening. The country was changing. Summer of Love was pending. All these different things were going on. But we're in West Virginia. West Virginia is in the middle of the Bible Belt. We have a lot of very conservative people that live there. These are 9 to 5 folks. They go to church on the weekends. They don't drink. If they do, they don't do a lot. I guess some of them smoke pot, according to Denny.
Apparently.
But what gets me is in a community that small, you have between 100 and 200 people who are so terrified that they're willing to risk their reputation to go forward, to give their names, to talk to police, to file reports, to talk to Mary Hire, to be in newspaper articles, to be on television, to talk to John Keel from New York, to let him write about them. And I mean, they didn't really stand to gain a whole lot by that. You talk about stigma, and all of a sudden they could very well be blackballed for the rest of their lives.
Sure, loss of jobs or,
They still talk about it. They had to.
Right. No, that's a really tough position to be in because like, you could lose your job, you could lose credibility. It doesn't really take much in that situation. And you're right, very conservative people do not want to go talk about ghost stories. There's that sense of logic. Well,
Mhm.
take the pot aside. I mean,
Yeah.
but that might also be saying, okay, come on. What were you doing when you saw that? So
When the kids showed up at the cop shop, you've
right.
got the Scarberries and the Millettes on
Yeah.
the 15th of November of '66. They
Mhm.
show up at the police station after racing 100 miles an hour from the TNT area down a really twisty, turny road that really is right along the Ohio River and pretty treacherous.
Right.
They showed up at the police station. They talked to Deputy Millard Halstead,
Mhm.
and they're talking crazy because this is outside of everybody's experience. I mean, talk about something to be afraid of. And his thought wasn't these kids are on something. His thought wasn't these kids are crazy. His thought wasn't they're up to something to manufacture some kind of nonsense. These were
Right.
reputable people. They were upstanding young citizens. He knew them since they were little kids. He believed that they saw something. And when
Right.
they were cornered and witnessed to their stories individually in separate rooms, they didn't vary. They all stayed on the same page. So it wasn't like they were trying to make something up or make it into something more than it was. They were terrified. They told it like it was, and they were very believable.
And their original statements are at the Mothman Mothman Museum, and you can read them. And they all said the same thing. And then later on, we found out this summer from Jeff that Linda and Mary both were taken to the hospital because they were in shock from it. They were treated for shock at the hospital. So, the people that want to say that they were making it up trying to get out of trouble is what we heard from a couple people that we interviewed. To go so far as to write 13-page front and back,
Right.
their reports of what happened, and then go to the hospital and be treated for shock.
No, it doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
Pretty extreme.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was me and I was trying to stay out of trouble,
I'd be keeping my mouth shut and just disappear for the night someplace.
I would have blamed a friend.
Exactly. Last thing you want to do is throw yourself under the bus and end up being totally exposed, and and also, small town. I mean, who's a good seed and who's not, and if the police officers know upstanding young citizens, I'm sure that they're going to take their word for it. They know who the troublemakers are. The community is small. It doesn't take much. So I'm glad that they took those testimonials seriously, because sometimes you're looking at young people, it's like, okay, sure, you saw that.
Yeah.
But how many other reports are coming in all in and around the same time also leading up to that point? Did they ever, what actually caused the collapse?
So after all of this stuff happened, we have all this 13 months worth of UFO activity, Mothman sightings, disembodied voices, Men in Black, all this different stuff. All these things are going on. December 15th, 10 days before Christmas, 5:00 in the afternoon, the Silver Bridge gets filled up with traffic from both sides. You've got people who are getting off work.
Right.
You've got people who are Christmas shopping, coming both directions. Silver Bridge was built in 1928. It was an I-bar construction, meaning it was one of very few that were manufactured not only in the country but in the world. It was revolutionary back in 1928, but we're talking 1967 now. So many years later, and instead of having bicycles, horses, and Model Ts going across this bridge, now we have bigger cars, semi-trailers, and couple this with the fact that, in Keel's words, the lights were recalcitrant, meaning that they both would go red at the same time. So in the middle of winter, freezing conditions, cold, people packed on the bridge. One of the I-bars had a manufacturing defect in it. They learned this later on. This manufacturing defect expanded, the I-bar collapsed, and the bridge went down like dominoes. It turned, I want to say it turned to the left first and then to the right. Do I have that right, or is that backwards?
Oh, so it swayed a little bit.
Yeah, and within a minute, I mean, it basically dumped half of the traffic off into the river, and then flipped the other way around, dumped the other half off, and then horribly so collapsed on top of all those vehicles.
Yeah.
So we've got frigid conditions, bridges down. Emergency folks went to work as soon as they possibly could. Only a handful of people survived it. 46 lives were lost, but ultimately it was found to be a manufacturing defect and really changing.
It was just stressed.
Vehicles, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, hairline fracture and IBAR 13.
Yeah, number 13 again. So we have 13 months.
Lots of 13s.
From that transpired between 15th and December 15th of next year. 13, IBAR number 13.
Right.
Number 13 is all over the place. We could probably go on ad nauseum about that.
Oh, that's a whole other show with the 13s.
Oh yeah, I have a spreadsheet of 13s. Yeah.
Here we go. I have to bring you back and say, okay.
Exhibit number 1.
That's right. Oh my gosh. I need to do a quick sponsor and station ID, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to get right to what made you decide to write the book. Okay. So for anybody just tuning in, shame on you. Should have done this like an hour and a half ago. Kidding. No, I'm not. Anyway, if you are just tuning in, you're listening to The Outer Realm here on United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. And guys, we are on Roku. Officially, we are live actually on Roku right now, so you can watch us from the comfort of your own home as well. Our sponsors, of course, are Folgers Coffee, who we love. They've been with us since day one, and we're really, really appreciative of having them. So thank you, Folgers. Justin Snicker, Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, award-winning composer of horror, Halloween, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music. Also, the master behind all of our intro, outro. So thank you to him. Artwork by Steve McGinnis. Thank you to you as well. So for the very first time, Bill and Jaci Kousoulas. Did I just say that, or did I butcher it? Did I get that right? What? What? Kousoulas. Got it. I'll be okay. So I think I just blurted it out a little too quick. They are the authors of Bridging the Tragedy. And we were talking about the Mothman. We were talking about the trauma and those who overcame it. And it's been a really awesome conversation, I have to say. So I always say that, conversation, because it kind of, I like it to just flow. So a lot of people tuning in. Only just now, Corinne, really? Hello to all. Nice to see you. Also, Wayne, nice to see you as well. Some of our regulars are like, where is everybody? But anyway, so let's get to the book. What made you decide to write the book about survivors and overcoming? And
in a word, in a name, Carolyn Harris. Okay. So my original education is I have a bachelor's in English. Right. And I spent, after finishing that, the next 14 years in technology sales. And I've always been an avid reader, but I've always been an aspiring writer. And never really got around to writing anything that I could publish. But at the age of 43, I asked Jaci if she thought that I had it in me to be a student, and would you mind if I went back to school? Oh. And she said, go ahead, take the class, because I probably was getting on her nerves a little bit. And
just go.
Entertaining me all the time.
Yeah, right.
And so I took a class, a psychology class, and I liked it. And then I took another one, and I liked it. Long story short, took a half a dozen psych classes because I've always been fascinated by the human thought process. Mm-hmm. Why do we think differently? Why do we do things the way we do? Collectively, mm-hmm. individually, what have you. So the whole thing was in order to go back to get an advanced degree. I wanted to get a master's in something, but I was nervous. I'm thinking I wasn't that great of a student the first time. I really had it in me. So I proved to myself I could do the online thing. So I jumped into a master's program and didn't find that to be too terribly hard. But what I loved about it was I got to write. And so when I finished that and kind of advanced a little bit in my career, after about 6 months, I got bored again. And I told Jaci, I said, I think I'm going to go back for a doctorate. And she knows better than to get in my way when I decide I want to do something. She's very supportive. And so she allowed me to go back to school. And as this we're talking about, I went back for the doctorate in 15. We met Carolyn in 16. And so I didn't know what I was going to really do with it. And frankly, I didn't know if I was ever going to finish it because it was hard. I mean,
Right.
here I'm in my 40s, late 40s, and I'm trying to do something while we're raising a family, and she's got a career and I've got a career, and it's expensive and blah, blah, blah. But we took this vacation to Point Pleasant and we met Carolyn and we loved Carolyn. And Carolyn gave us her cell phone numbers, which we thought was really neat. I mean, this is a lady who'd been on a number of documentaries, all kinds of things about Point Pleasant, monsters and mysteries type programs, things of that nature. And so we kind of felt like we were in the presence of a star when we met her, but she was so humble and so kind. We, a few months later, after we went back home, after having our mountaintop type experience in Point Pleasant, kind of went into a little bit of a funk. Just figured I'd never go back. And I'm back into my humdrum life and all this business. But Christmas Eve, as we were headed to Jackie's mom's house to celebrate Christmas, I told her, I said, Carolyn gave us her phone numbers and we haven't used them. And by golly, I would really like to talk to her and see if I could write something about her life.
Wow.
And she said, why don't you call her? Why don't you give her a call? But let's do it after the holidays. So we agreed that we were going to call Carolyn after the holidays. So our buddy, Mark Griffith, who we'd stayed in contact with from the time we'd met the both of them a few months earlier, sent us a message on Christmas. And he said, Carolyn had a heart attack. And we were immediately stunned to hear that. Carolyn wasn't young, but here we had kind of finally decided we wanted to do something big and involve her with it. And the next day, Carolyn died.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
We were crushed.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
It brings tears to my eyes today to say it.
Yeah.
And I never really knew why, and I'll share with you later why. I learned it took me a while to figure out why exactly, because I only knew her for a handful of days. We didn't know her that long.
Right.
But long story short, I went back, continued my curriculum. We got closer and closer to getting done, and we joined. We attended a couple MUFON meetings. It was like a couple's goal. We wanted to get out because by this point she had built businesses. So in addition to her career as a postmaster, she's operating a couple businesses. And she's super busy with those. And I'm going to school and I'm doing my day job. We're raising our granddaughter by then. So we're just juggling all.
Yes.
But I finally got to the point where I went through the comps, which was a horrible experience. And then I got to the dissertation and that was worse. But we finished the dissertation. And by the time we got done with that, I'd been thinking I needed the next project. And so we began kind of kicking around ideas as to what to do with it. My dissertation was about the concept of post-traumatic growth. It's about the good things that we gain as individuals and collectively by going through things that we don't think we could possibly survive. And as we kind of kicked it around for a month or so, we came up with the idea of why don't we investigate post-traumatic growth? And Jaci had come up with this before, but post-traumatic growth and paranormal experiences. And we kicked it on a little bit more and finally decided, why don't we do something about the Silver Bridge disaster? And as a way to perhaps honor Carolyn and her memory, plus the other people that we had met over the last 5-6 years that we've been commuting annually to Point Pleasant, because every time we went back there, we would make more friends.
Right.
And we see more stores open up. And we saw the community growing and growing and growing. So that was a big part of it right there.
Yeah, it's very encouraging. I think it's beautiful. I think it's paying homage to your friend and all of those who are just, overcome, again, like a tragedy, but a stigma as well. But yet turning it into this, this tourist mecca, where people come from all over the world just to participate and hear the stories and investigate and just be a part of that experience. So writing this book, you're interviewing people, that would have had to have been very emotional. How did you convince people to just come in and talk about all of this, especially those who don't want to talk about it at all?
You go ahead, talk about it.
So Mark we wanted him to be part of the story. He needed to be part of the story.
Right.
Because we met him on our first trip. We met him with Carolyn. He's kept up with us regular. We've seen him almost every time we've gone back to Point Pleasant. We wanted him to be involved in the story. So we asked him if he could be our first participant. And he said, yeah. I said, well, Mark, we love you, but we need more than just you.
Right. Right.
So he said, tell you what, let me put the word out, see what I come up with.
Right.
So as he was doing that, we came up with an idea to contact Jeff, because by then we'd been pretty friendly with Jeff. We'd been to dinner with him several times, and every time hung out in the museum, and just, we like the same kind of music. So he and I visited about that. We just have a fun relationship. And so we made a plan to contact him. I got Andy Colvin, who we talked about, who's probably the most prolific Mothman researcher alive today in terms of the volume of work he's done.
And our only Mothman witness.
Yeah, he's our Mothman witness also.
Yeah.
And we wanted to we contacted Steve Ward. And I don't know if you know Steve Ward or not. Do you know who that is?
I've actually heard of the name. Yeah, but I don't know.
Steve is somebody who's been a Keeled disciple since the 60s. So he's somebody who's really
a kindred spirit then. Okay.
Yeah. When he retired, he moved from Michigan to Point Pleasant, and now he works with Jeff at the museum.
Yeah.
So he's one who's super connected also. So we weren't necessarily looking to ask them to participate in particular. We were asking them to point us in the direction of people that we could interview. But what ended up happening out of all of that is we deepened our relationship with Jeff. We deepened our relationship with Steve. And then we built a friendship with Andy. And Steve, although he wasn't really a witnesser and wasn't really present then, wasn't somebody we interviewed, but Andy and Jeff were. So we got Andy and Jeff that way. We had Mark. Mark got a hold of the Point Pleasant Roads Commissioner, Rick Handley. We got Rick involved. So we started building a little bit. And then we got a hold of Ashley Walmsley, who is Jeff's daughter. And she's really central to the whole Mothman franchise that they have out there too. And we said, Ashley, we've got, a handful of people, but really for the type of methodology we're going to do, we need to have 8 to 10 people. I could use your help. What do you think? She said, get a hold of Beth Sargent. Beth Sargent runs the newspapers out here, and I'll get you connected to her, and then you can see what she has to say. So we lined up a conference call with Beth, and we talked to her, and Beth was real tentative with us. And she said, I like your idea, but you got to be really careful, because our idea was to interview people about Mothman and their experience of the paranormal, also about the Silver Bridge and their experience of that. And she said, you can do that. But you got to be really careful not to combine them. Don't make it look like, this is Silver Bridge Mothman type of or what have you. She said, you need to be respectful. You need to be curious. So we laid out for her what our research plan was, and we followed a real strict research plan. And we sent that to her, and we talked to her, and she said, you know what? I'll put an article in the paper for you. What we didn't know, Michelle, was that she put that article on the front page of the Point Pleasant Register, the Gallup Police newspaper, and another newspaper there in the area. And she would not charge us a dime for it. So unbelievable. It's like serendipitous, really.
Yeah.
Right.
We started getting phone calls. And the first phone call that I got was from a Southern gentleman. I could tell he was older. He told us his name was Jimmy Wedge. I didn't know who Jimmy Wedge was. I had no clue. But Jimmy Wedge lost mom and dad both in the bridge disaster.
See, my heart sinks every time I hear something like that.
I was immediately, I was a little rattled.
Right. It's very humbling, isn't it?
Unbelievably so.
Yes.
Unbelievably so.
Yes.
And he said, I'd like to be part of your study. And I just told him we'd be honored. We'd be honored to interview. So we were able to line Jimmy up as a result of that article. We still didn't have enough people there, but when we arrived in Point Pleasant, Linda Lane called us up. And Linda Lane was a person who was present there. She was 18 when the bridge went down, and she said she'd be a part of it. Charlene Westwood also called us, and she said, I'd like to be a part of your conversation. Let's do that.
Wow.
So it was a matter of, in the research community, it's a combination of targeted participation and then snowball sampling, because you've got people referring other people who are part of the study. So that all kind of rolled together, and the end result it was a combination of those ways. That's how we found our folks to participate, and we ended up with 11.
And Facebook, we got Andy and Harriet. From
Oh
Facebook.
yeah. You're right. We set up a Zoom meeting with Andy Colvin. That's how we met him.
And Harriet.
Right.
And Harriet Brook, who is an absolute psychic rock star. We love her. She's amazing.
She is.
And she was a recipient also. So she was one that had paranormal stuff going on too. And she's become a good friend of ours too, that I could go off on, and my wife would probably kick me under the table because I always. That's how we got Harriet as well. Did I miss anyone? Marva
through Linda Lane. Well, you missed Linda too, but that's okay. They'd have to get the book to see all the names and remember them also.
Yes.
That's kind of how it came together. If I missed anybody, I'm sorry, but that's
so it's basically you've got this whole Point Pleasant family happening. So this yearning you had to go back. Now it's like you're a part of the entire equation. So the study itself, what did it involve?
So what we did is we designed 2 sets of guiding questions, and the guiding questions are open-ended. We had to make sure and use a concept known as bracketing, which means we are totally taking our expectations out of the mix. These questions are all about the participants. So we asked them things like, what was going on before the bridge disaster? What was your life like when it happened? What changed? What is it like today? And I'm summarizing for you. But we had a series of probably 18 questions, and they were pertinent to the bridge disaster. And then we mirrored those questions for the people who wanted to talk about Mothman encounters or paranormal things. Right. So we had 2 sets of guiding questions, but really we would do the interviewing process, but it was just like this. They were conversations like we're having right here. They were guiding questions. They were meant to spark the conversation. And if this conversation went in a different direction than it looked like it would, we let them roll, because this was about them. It wasn't about us.
Right. I think it's fantastic. It's so humbling that all these people will come forward, and just the fact that you end up with this help, getting this posted on the front page, no less, of the newspaper. It was almost like she wanted reassurance that you would have integrity, because it was just such a, it's such a mark on the town, and their community. And some people obviously still reel from it, but the fact that they're willing to come forward and discuss it, I thought is interesting. So how did you fare up with the studies? Like, what was your determination, the before and after, with everyone?
Well, what we did really is we went through the series of questions, and then at that point, I applied a methodology known as coding, grounded after transcription. So I'm sorry, I skipped a step. We videoed and audioed everybody. Well, a couple of them didn't want to be videoed, so we didn't do that. But we recorded everything and then transcribed all those. And then we took those transcriptions and we loaded them into a software. And the software is called Atlas TI. And the purpose of the software is just like an electronic filing cabinet. Because the next step then is, mind you, to look at every single line of every statement that was made and pull a meaning unit from that statement. So when Mark Griffith told us that a lady told him there was a thing called the Birdman, and he was a little boy and he didn't know anything about it, and he had just moved to town, he said, why would you tell a little kid that? You're going to scare him half to death. So the meaning unit from that is fear, young, what have you. And then you just keep on tabbing each one of the statements that each one of the participants makes in order to assign meaning to them. That's called initial coding. So that process, I don't know how long that took, but we ended up with almost 2,300 initial codes.
Wow.
Those codes, then we start looking for common themes. How do these fit together? Which ones belong? Which are pertinent to what we're looking for? Because ultimately, we're looking for post-traumatic growth. We're looking for the good stuff from the bad things. So the next step is called focused coding. So we create all these categories. And these categories basically take this 2,300 set of codes and takes it down into about 100 different categories. So we're getting more precise, but that's still a lot of data.
It is, yeah.
The next thing we have to do is to take all that data and just distill it down a little bit more and find more things that are more pertinent to what we're looking for, pulling out the ones that may have been things that a lot of people talked about, but weren't really related to the concept of post-traumatic growth. And pull all those different, what are known as dimensions, from that final step of coding, which is called theoretical coding. That's how we arrived with the dimensions of post-traumatic growth.
Mhm.
And we're happy to share those with you if you'd like to hear them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Good. Stage is yours.
Bear with me. Maybe Jackie can fill up the airtime while I find the page. 271. Let's see.
See, she's a champion. She just automatically knows what you have to do. So
Mama says 271, and she's right. She's the brains of the operation. I'm the mouth. I'm the mouth. So what we found out was, and these are the things we found from the community of Point Pleasant that presented as positive things, post-traumatic growth, as a result of going through what they went through.
Okay.
The first one was a concept called appreciation for life. The second one was community. Next was entrepreneurialism, family, gratitude, memorial, optimism, patience, perseverance, personal development, perspective taking, positive reflections, preparedness, responsibility, and spiritual development.
Wow. It just resonates with me as you're saying that. And again, that's just from, like just psychically how it makes me feel when you're chiming those words off. And I take in the energy of Point Pleasant. It all just resonates, like it just hits you in the core. Like it's, kudos. I think you guys did a fantastic job. It just nails it.
Thank you.
That's exactly, these people have persevered. They've overcome tragedy, stigma. They've literally just evolved the whole community as a community. And, all of everything that they were feeling inside, resonates in everything that you see when you go there today. Mm-hmm. Based on people, I know many people who've gone, and there's not one that's had a bad experience.
Yeah. And it's just outstanding. We had always gone in off season. I'm not usually a big crowds guy.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I a little bit more towards the introvert side than the extrovert side.
Right.
Jackie likes big stuff like that. She does great in those types of environments. But
yeah,
we were invited by Ashley Walmsley and Jeff and I had been talking for a couple of years about us coming and presenting what we were working on. But the Mothman Festival was canceled for a couple of years because of the COVID thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So we actually, I think I can speak for me. I was a little relieved in 21 because we didn't have anything to present yet. We were still working on this thing, and we wanted to come out there and at least talk about it, but it wasn't done.
Right.
But we really worked our tails off to get things ready in time for this year's festival, and never had published a book before. So we worked with Andy Colvin again, who is a pro at this. He helped us get this thing across the finish line. He said, guys, you can't go to the festival without a book. You got to have it done.
Right.
So we put the book together. We got it done. It was published at the very end of August, and we were able to ship cases of it to the museum. And Jeff held on to them for us when we got there. But we arrived at the festival, set up a booth, and that place typically pulled between 12 and 15,000 people over the weekend. This year, because of the pent-up demand, there were over 30,000 people in this little community. Mothman Saturday was just crazy.
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 It was insane.
And how did the book do? How was it received?
We came home with some, but we sold a bunch.
That's all that matters.
Yeah, we had such fun. It was
living the experience, I say. So
it was wonderful. We had in the tent that we were in, we were right next to George Dudding, who's a paranormal publisher from the area who's got all kinds of books out. We've gotten to know him a little bit over the years. Mark Randall
was next to George.
Was next to George, and Mark is a creative artist who does things for small town monsters. We've gotten to know him the last few years as well too. Complete gentleman, great guy. Across from us directly was Lyle Blackburn, who I imagine you got to be familiar with that name.
Yes, of course.
Next was Ken Gerhard.
Of course, he's been on the show.
Yeah. And next to him was Nick Redfern.
He's been on the show a few times.
So, and this is our first time ever at the Mothman Festival.
I know, I love it.
But
and Andy came and supported us. He sat there in the booth with
he
us.
surprised us. he surprised us.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool.
He didn't ask us if we wanted him to join us. He told us he was
He
coming.
was just, I'm here.
Andy's got a hot rod. He went out and bought himself a 72 Chevelle Survivor. His
Very
car
nice.
is lights out gorgeous.
Yeah.
And he just shows up, drives from Columbus and shows up, and here I am, and he's got a pizza in the car. You want some pizza? It's hilarious, dude. Such a good time. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love that, you take this experience and now it's just larger than life, and you have all these people coming together for one common reason.
Mhm.
And it's I love it. What do you have coming next? As we're slowly getting at the top of the hour, this is the part where you promote yourself. Tell people what you have coming up. I understand you're working on another book.
Yes.
Anything you want to talk about?
Well, we had originally planned to hit the road running right after the first of the year with our new study looking for participants, but he has been recently hospitalized, so it's kind of put us back a little bit on any of that. But when we presented at the Mothman Festival, our last frame on our PowerPoint presentation was asking the audience for help. We had come up with 3 different ideas of what we were looking to do. And when I was going over those ideas, I started talking about the one that's most dear to my heart is paranormal experience and sexual abuse and physical abuse, any type of abuse that the paranormal experiences might, in my mind, are bringing in.
Stem from?
And
that might stem from the experiences?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
And how you can grow from that. And so that one, because of the things that came out of my mouth while I was talking about it, which I had not planned at all, some lady came up afterwards, and I was talking about when I was a child. There were heads on the dresser at night, and I was little, and I remember peeking out from my covers and seeing these heads on the dresser all the time, and I was scared to death. Well, I found out later on in life that my sister, who shared a bedroom with me, also saw the heads, but she didn't want me to know that because she was my older sister and she didn't want to scare me, but she was scared to death too.
And she was experiencing it, validation for you.
Yes. And I found out even further along in life that that's the time when she started being sexually abused by one of our uncles. And my dad was alcoholic and he beat my mom. And we had a lot of abuse going on, but
so it's a traumatic thing. Okay. See how certain types of energy can manifest and attract.
Yes. Okay. And I think that manifested because of her abuse, and I was able to see it because we were so close. But when I was talking about that, someone came up afterwards and she literally couldn't talk, and Bill was going to go talk to her, and she's like, no, and she was pointing at me. And when I started talking to her, she said, I said, you saw the heads too? And she said, but it was snakes.
Wow.
She saw snakes when she was growing up. So she had packed it away in a tidy little place in the corner of her self. And when I started talking about that, she remembered it. She had no recollection of it at all.
You triggered it.
Yes.
Wow.
So that's what we're looking to do for our next study.
So if anybody listening to the show tonight would like to get in contact with you guys, maybe to participate, connect with you guys, stories of their own, how would they do that? What's the best way?
They could contact us through our email, which is prp2022@gmail.com. They can message us on Facebook.
Okay.
They can friend request us. They have to look up our names. I don't know if you have them up. Yeah.
Everything that is all in the show description. Everything you sent me, it's all there.
Okay.
So I can I can add your emails. I always like to ask first before I just put it out there to everybody who listen, millions of people, but I will add your emails to the show description if, with your permission then.
Yes, that's fine. And then we also have a Facebook page, Phenomenology Research Professionals, that they could contact us through that too.
Oh, excellent. Okay. I love that. It has been so much fun. I love the book. Where can they buy your book?
Amazon. And then if people don't use Amazon accounts, because not everybody does, if they contact us on Facebook, we will ship them one. It's free shipping on Amazon, $19.99. We'll ship you one for $20 free shipping.
Right.
So just contact us on Facebook. Let us know. We'll make the arrangements to get it to them.
Fantastic. I do not want to end the show without people knowing how to get your book. So thank you so much for joining me. It was been really awesome. You're so knowledgeable. I love what you did with the book. I love how you're just bringing the whole story of the people of Point Pleasant to the public with just in an entirely different light. I think you've made it more about the people than about Mothman.
It literally
Mothman's
is.
had his day.
That's literally what I was telling people at the festival. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is an excellent book, and it's not because we wrote it. It's because the people that
wrote it.
It's the interviews. They're in the book. I mean, that makes the book.
Yeah, we have all 11 interviews in there, and they really are the best part of it, because you get those experiences from those people. It's just they did a tremendous job of representing their experiences.
They sure did.
Right. And you guys have done a tremendous job of bringing it to light. So there we have it, everybody. So again, thank you. Oh, people are going to start chiming in. Oh, there we go. There we go. It'll keep going. So, but thank you. I will be in touch after, once I get off the soundboard. I like to always let our guests know how many people were chiming in and just fill you in and send you links to archives and things like that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Excellent. So thank you guys again, and I will be in touch, and I hope you guys have a fantastic week.
You too.
You as well.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Well, that was fantastic. Just such I'll say, heartwarming, because it really was. It's a story that so many people are fascinated with, but from the Mothman point of things, this is so much more about the people. And I think sometimes people lose sight of the fact. They think, oh, the festivals, Mothman, paranormal. But I think you lose sight of the fact that really was about people and a tragedy that affected many lives for years and decades to come. So big thank you to our special guests, Bill and Jaci, for that. So big thank you. Just love this episode. But we are at the end of this fantastic segment here in the Outer Realm. So we'd like to thank Bill and Jaci for joining us. Just super, super interview. Big thank you to Folgers Coffee, who are part of our Outer Realm experience here. Thank you to Dr. Snick, Justin Snicker. Thank you to Steve McGinnis. If you guys, no matter where you're watching the platform, please like us, follow us, love us, subscribe, whatever it takes. We appreciate you so much. And you just make the show so much more fun. So thank you to everybody in chat who was chiming in. Corinne, to your answer where you asked what they thought Mothman was, serial killer, messenger of doom, ET, the answer at the beginning of the show, and they believe they were leaning to interdimensional being. So I just wanted to get that out there also. So again, guys, if you want to contact us, please, outerrealmcontact@gmail.com. We have a lot of people sending us guest ideas. We do try to get to everybody. And if they fit in with the whole genre of the show, we are happy to bring new faces on. They're just going to have to wait a few months because we are backed up about 3 months right now. But we are doing our very best to get people booked in a timely manner. Which brings me to tomorrow night's guest, Richard D. Lewis, who's going to be discussing his book, The Paranormal Christian. Yep, religion and paranormal. Kind of a funky thing, but definitely it's interesting. I've been reading it. It's like, it's going to be a good show. So tomorrow night, tune in for some more fun. Remember, we're on Roku. If you're not on Roku, go get Roku. And if you haven't been a part of our channel yet, just find us on UFO Paranormal United Public Radio. Just like that. And I'm sure if you check out all throughout our Facebook pages on the network, you will find a way to get in there. But we were live there tonight. So it's a big bonus for our guests, big bonus for more of our listeners to be able to find us. So guys, thank you. We will see you tomorrow evening. And thank you for tuning in.